Hi, welcome back to the Busy Corner. This is lesson 4. Today I am going to show you how to make a tabletop knitting stand. You use this just as you would the microphone stand that I did in the first 3 videos. I'm going to show you how to make it out of PVC pipe. You can see I have a piece in progress, and this is 1/2 inch pipe, and it has a circumference of, I've already forgotten, about 2 3/4 inches. So it will produce a knit size right in between a US 35 and a US 50 needle. It'll look almost like this if you do a stockinette stitch. I made it out of 1/2 inch pipe so that I had the best flexibility in terms of increasing my needle size. So if you wanted to, you could make this out of 3/4 inch pipe, but I wanted to be able to slip on these 3/4 inch covers, which is a different kind of pipe, and I'll explain that in a moment. But just like in using the microphone stand, you're just going to slip that right over there. That's a 3/4 inch thin-walled pipe. It's 200 psi, and the largest I use is the 6-inch circumference pipes, and they just slip over like that, and that's how you use it, and they're all interchangeable. When you buy your pipe, you are going to want to look for Schedule 40. Find what it says here on it. You're going to want to buy Schedule 40 600 psi pipe. See that? 1/2 inch. And you are going to want to buy all the adapters to put your knitting stand together. You will need 77 inches of Schedule 40 pipe, which is almost 6.5 feet. You will need 4 T-pieces for 1/2 inch Schedule 40 pipe, 4 end caps for these legs, and you will need 2 elbows for the portion where the knitting needles are. And you'll notice when I have this all together here that these are angled back slightly. This would be the minimum. I would suggest angling it, because you'll see when you put on this pipe, it actually reduces that angle somewhat. But that's just to keep your knitting from slipping off the front of the needles. So that's the minimum I would suggest. You're not going to glue this together. You don't need glue. And the reason is you want these to be able to rotate just like this, so that when you put on larger needles, you have more room at the tips. For instance, if I take off this knitting, put on this extra pipe here. So now you've got your biggest size pipes on here. You'll want a little more space now at your tips. So I made this so it is about 15.5 inches across. It is 16 inches from the front to the back. And I've already cut some of your pieces that you're going to need to make. You will need altogether, out of that 77 inches of pipe, 2 2-inch pieces. And that is going to join your 2 T-pieces here. You are going to need 2 4-inch pieces for your back legs. You will need 3 7-inch pieces for your uprights and your joining piece at the base between your 2 T's. You will need 2 10-inch pieces for your front legs right here, and 2 12-inch pieces for your knitting needles, I call them. Another reason you don't want to glue this, by the way, is so you can take it apart. Now, you can take these out of here, just like this. Sometimes PVC, by the way, once you've got it together, just kind of has a stick of its own. It fits very tightly. Twisting it is the best way to get it out. You'll have more luck with that than you will pulling it. So give it a little twist. It'll come right out of there. And the legs will come off. And what you'll be left with is this. And the reason you need to, you'll see that this is all screwed in here. The reason you want to do that is if you do not, because PVC has slides a lot easier than it pulls out, as you work your piece of knitting, that those knitting needles will have a tendency to rotate forward, and you want to stop that from happening. You could use glue, but it's a mess, and it's not cheap. It's a two-stage process. You need the primer and the glue itself. And I'm not so sure it would hold over time as well as just screwing it. So this assembly will just be one unit, and then the rest will all go onto it. So I've already cut all the pieces we need except for the last one, which is our two 12-inch pieces. There's a couple ways you can cut pipe. When you buy this at the store, it's going to come in at 10-foot length. You need to buy the 10-foot. Well, they have a 5-foot, but it's almost as expensive as the 10-foot, and you need almost 6.5 feet. So you can have them cut it for you in the plumbing department, which is where you'll find all this. Now they'll either cut it with a hacksaw or this handy-dandy tool right here. You can buy one of these. It is made especially for cutting PVC, but it's $12. This cuts PVC up to 1.5 inch thick. And they may cut it like this. This is so cool. I love this thing. So now you've got it. It's a ratchet. You want to make sure you don't have your finger in there. If you do that, it leaves no burrs. You won't have to do any sanding. So if you have one of these, great item. But if you don't, a hacksaw is just as good. And I've already marked this 24-inch piece. You'll notice I've already taken all the writing off of this. And I think the easiest thing to do is a moist sanding sponge. It will knock the gloss down a little bit. Oops, sorry about that. It'll knock the gloss down a little bit. You don't want to scratch this stuff. If you have trouble getting it apart, be really careful. And if you're going to use pliers to twist it, you might want to cover it. You don't want the knitting needle to get scratched because that might snag your yarn. But in any event, this will do a good job of taking off that writing. Just moisten it a little bit. And it will also deburr the ends if you have to use a hacksaw. So let me show you real quick how to hacksaw a piece of PVC pipe, because it always wants to roll, of course. It's hard to hold on to. So if you have anybody to steady the other end for you, I like these clamps, these quick grip clamps. They have rubber teeth, if you will, and that will actually stop it from rolling. Otherwise, it was hard to cut something round. Use two so it doesn't shift back and forth. You can buy a hacksaw for $5. It's usually hanging right there with the pipe, and if not, just back in the tool department. And PVC cuts very easily. You want to put your saw on your mark. Give a couple of slow strokes first, and it just takes a couple of strokes to start cutting that plastic. Might even want to put a trash can there underneath. Once you start, you can speed it up a bit. There you go. You're going to be left with a shaggy cut there, so just use some sandpaper or your sanding sponge. Clean that up because that's going to prevent your pipe pieces from fitting together. So now we have all our pipe pieces cut. And I recommend, like I say, rather than gluing it, I recommend that you use your drill and a drill bit. For my project, I used 8 5/8 metal. They call panhead screws, so they're flat head with a Phillips head. And I used, did I say 8 5/8? So you're going to want, if you use that size, use a drill bit that is 7/64. You want your drill bit smaller than your screw, obviously, but not too small because you don't want your pipe to split when you cut it. Now let's take this off here. Open our screws. You're going to need 6 of these screws. And now we can start assembling our piece. I'm going to pull this back over to here. And the first thing you're going to need are your T-pieces. And take one of your 2-inch pieces, put it into your T-piece. That's going to start your legs. This will be your upright. So now you have two pieces. Continuing across the bottom, you have a 7-inch piece. Another T-piece. Put this straight up. That's going to be for your verticals, both this and this. And here's another T-piece. Let's put our connector on there. So here's another 2-inch connector that you've cut from the pipe. And your last base piece. Push this together tight, because these aren't going to come apart. You're going to screw these. If you saw my first version of this video, I said not to do that, but I changed my mind, because I dropped 2 bolts on the floor when I forgot that I didn't have those permanently in there. So I changed my design. So now you have that. Put your back leg on, and a cap. These don't have to be so tight. Back leg and a cap. Whoops, that's an upright. That's the wrong piece. Now take your 10-inch piece, that's a front leg. Another 10-inch piece is your other front leg. Coming right along, put your cap on there, and another cap. Now you're going to push it down. You want to make sure that when you assemble this, you assemble it on a flat surface, because you want this to sit level and not bounce around as you're knitting on it. And the next thing you want to put in is your vertical. Those are your 7-inch pieces. By the way, before you cut your pipe, you might want to think about what height your table is going to be. You can change this to make it any height you want. I like it to be at about my collarbone. So let's put on this elbow. It's a 90-degree elbow. Make sure when you buy your fittings, you're buying something, smooth on both sides. Sometimes they get mixed up at the store. You might even want to fit all your pieces onto your pipe you're buying just to make sure you've picked up the right ones before you leave the store. It's also a good time to buy all your cover pipe. And that way you'll know what fits over this. For instance, if you buy 3/4 inch Schedule 40 pipe, it's not going to fit over this 1/2 inch. So you have to get the thinner stuff. The rest will. They'll fit on there. So you just want to determine where you want this to be. I like to high enough that I can see it easily, but not so high my arms are tired. So right about here, that's where I like it. But a lot will depend on your table. This is a kind of a lowish pull-out drawer, so you might want to experiment a little bit before you make your final cut to 7 inches and cut them a bit longer to start. So what you want to determine before you screw this together now is your angle. This is as far as you'd want to go, I think, because you don't want it always sliding back down here either. So maybe you want to make it a little bit less, but you want them to be the same. Right now, you're just setting your angle for these. And again, it's no exact science here. This is just to keep your yarn from falling off. And you want them to be relatively the same. So you want those pushed in there as you're making that. That looks pretty good. This is always going to flex, even when you screw it a little bit. So I'd say, well, that's pretty good, just like that. So now I'm going to drill holes for my screws. I'm going to turn this around, make sure that it's level, and make sure that these angles are equal. You can always get down, kind of eyeball it from the side, and you'll tell from the tips. You'll be able to tell. So now you take your drill, if you are using a drill. Normally it'd be hard to drill through something round, but this plastic, that bit will bite into it pretty quickly. You want to make sure you don't drill all the way through. All you need to do is go through your fitting and the piece of pipe below it. Don't go all the way into the back, because then you'll have something scratchy on the bottom. It's just not necessary. So anyway, so now you're going to take your drill and you are going to make sure you have it, I would say, I'm going to say it's probably going to be a 1/4 inch from the end, because you want to catch both ends of pipes, and that's why I had you push it. Make sure it's all level, And if you have any trouble with your bit slipping, it almost wanted to slip there, you can always put a little masking tape right over that spot and it'll give you something there, drill something to bite. And if you want to, you can go all the way across. At this point, by the way, you might find it easier to take these out. Just make sure you don't. Just make sure when you do that, you don't disturb the angle of that part. And you're just going to go all the way across, just like I did the first one. Once you do that, you'll have 6 at each point where the T-piece is and the connector underneath. You'll do that all the way across, so you have 6. And then, assuming that I did that all the way across, then you should be able to put your screws in. You can use something smaller than this if you want. As you screw this in, your piece is going to want to spin on you, so you might want to hold the leg a little bit. Just drive it right down there. Make sure you don't make your hole too big. Okay, I used a 7/64. And there you go. Just do that all the way across. And you'll be finished. Enjoy your new knitting stand.